This is Atlas Launch Control at T-minus 5 hours, 55 minutes, and counting. The Atlas V vehicle is fueled and ready for launch, and is being configured and standing by. Spacecraft has initiated its time warp. We don't appear to have any boil off. It's dawn here at the Kennedy Space Center. We have not seen any boil off of liquid hydrogen or hydrolox. Spacecraft is launching in T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7 seconds to liftoff. 6, 5, 4, 3, RD-180 ignition, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Atlas V with COMSAT, continuing to improve the communications throughout the solar system. Spacecraft is beginning a slow roll. The Atlas V is flying in the 421 configuration. 541 solid, flying in the 541 configuration with a 5-meter wide fairing, 4 solid rocket boosters, and a single main engine on the upper stage. Atlas should begin its pitch program shortly. When the spacecraft reaches 650 meters, the spacecraft will begin its pitch program. Pitch program is in. Spacecraft is 1 kilometer in altitude. Final roll is in. Pitch program complete. Roll program complete. Pitch program continuing as expected. Atlas flight continuing as expected. Atlas flight performing nominal. Now 176 meters per second. Arcing out over the Atlantic Ocean, 3 kilometers in altitude. A beautiful dawn liftoff from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Spacecraft is continuing to drain liquid kerosene and liquid oxygen. Spacecraft is hydrolox in the upper stage for the Centaur main engine. Approaching Mach 1, Mach 0.8. Spacecraft is on course as expected, heading right down the center of the range. Secondary roll program is in progress. In order to reduce secondary roll program is in. Secondary roll program complete. Spacecraft is now through Mach 1 and is experiencing good. The aerodynamic pressure is nominal at 33. Flight is continuing to perform as expected. Aerodynamic pressure is nominal. Spacecraft is continuing to fly. Flight continuing as expected. The Atlas is being propelled today by 4 AJ-60 solid rocket boosters and the NPO Agurnamash RD-180 engine. The 4 solid rocket boosters are performing as expected. We are starting to see thrust tail off. Standing by for solid rocket motor separation. Standing by for SRM SEP. SRM thrust tail off, continuing nominally. We have throttle back up the main stage in preparation for our solid rocket motor SEP. We have throttle back on the main stage. Standing by for solid rocket motor separation. Spacecraft now traveling at 1 kilometer per second. SEP set 1. Set 2 separated. 4 solid rocket motors have jettisoned from the spacecraft. Spacecraft is traveling at 800 meters per second surface velocity. Spacecraft has rolled back onto the 0-degree heading, 90 degrees from the launch site. Spacecraft is continuing to maintain nominal flight through 35 kilometers. Spacecraft has flight level. Spacecraft is not experiencing hydrolox boil off. Spacecraft is experiencing nominal flight. The RD-180 main engine continues to burn, as the spacecraft is now 46 kilometers in altitude. Apogee of 75 kilometers. You can see the apogee increasing. The RD-180 main engine continues to propel the spacecraft into orbit. We'll propel the spacecraft up to an apogee of 260 kilometers, at which point the RL-10 the Centaur main engine will take over. "61 kilometers in altitude. The moon is visible in the right-hand corner of your... The moon is visible in the right-hand corner of your screen. Speaking of the moon, this weekend there's going to be a super blood moon. It's not the moon, is it? Let's take a look into space from position of the launch site. That's odd. There's nothing above the launch site. It must have been the moon. Spacecraft now is approaching an apogee of 100 kilometers. Mark 100 kilometers. Spacecraft is 77 kilometers in altitude, downrange distance 35 kilometers, traveling at 1.4 kilometers per second. The Centaur main stage is not experiencing any fuel boil-off. Fairing SEP should occur at around 100 kilometers. The Realistic Design Bureau is continuing to work on their rockets. The Delta IV would be in production if the RS-68 engine in realism overhaul would ever ignite. The Realistic Design Bureau in this episode will be performing a RD-180 main engine test. Spacecraft is 92 kilometers in altitude and continuing to fly as expected. Apogee is 115 kilometers and increasing. Perigee is negative 6.11 million kilometers. We still have a periapse inside of the Earth, while our apoapse is out of the Earth, is in the vacuum of space, is approaching the vacuum of space. We should see fairing separation shortly. Stand by for fairing SEP. Spacecraft should have fairing SEP at around 120 kilometers. Spacecraft is beginning its final roll. Roll complete. Kerosene and liquid oxygen continuing to draw as expected. 4 of the solid rocket boosters were destroyed. 2 of them anyways. Now traveling 2 kilometers per second, surface velocity. Apogee of 125 kilometers. Spacecraft is now 109 kilometers. That's never good. The other 2 solid rocket motors have dropped off and been destroyed. Spacecraft should see fairing jettison shortly. Stand by for fairing SEP. Apogee in space. Stand by for fairing separation. In about 1 second. Stand by. Mark. Fairings have separated from the spacecraft. The spacecraft and its main propulsion systems are now exposed. Apogee of 136 kilometers. Apogee now increasing, 137. Spacecraft is now at Mach 12. Approaching Mach 13. Mach 13. The spacecraft mission needs to end due to